I was turning a tumbler in my hand, unsure when it had been poured, when the sentence landed. The air was thick with frosting and cheap bubbles. Flames wavered on a cake shaped into a milestone nobody wanted to say aloud. My sister, no, Mara now, wore a smile too sharp to be kind. You've outlived your usefulness, she said, clear and cutting. Move on. Laughter stumbled around the room, people waiting for a punchline that never came. The band didn't stop. I searched for my father. Elias studied the floor, then lifted his chin and gave a small, practiced nod. Neat and done, he said. That was when I understood the density of quiet. I didn't protest. I didn't shatter the glass. I placed it on the table, smoothed my sleeves, and slipped out through a service corridor. It struck me how simple it was to leave a place I had assembled piece by piece. A decade earlier, there had been nothing but concrete dust and a borrowed desk. Elias called it a shared vision. I called it labor. I answered phones at impossible hours, argued terms with lenders who mispronounced our name, repaired damage before anyone noticed it existed. Mara was busy being seen. I was busy making sure things worked. Father preferred the spotlight. I preferred the ledger. Growth came the way storms do, slow clouds, then sudden rain. 50 million isn't luck. It's restraint. It's reading every page, weighing risk instead of cheering it. My signatures held most of it together, hidden in footnotes and appendices, stitching the framework tight. So when the removal came, it felt choreographed. The party was just the finale. The real work had begun months earlier. Calendars I was no longer copied on, a strategist who never returned my calls, questions from Elias that stopped seeking answers and started fishing for agreement. Mara began talking about heritage and handovers like the company was ill and I was the fever. I noticed the documents changing too. Authority nudged sideways, permissions trimmed. Nothing criminal, just careful omission. It would have rattled someone reactive. I stayed still. I listened. I saved emails. I remembered the nights Elias called me indispensable. I remembered fixing Mara's messes without credit. Trust has a shelf life. Memory lasts longer. After the celebration, I slept deeply. That surprised me. Preparation does that. By morning, messages were waiting, board members, lenders, anchor clients. Not complaints. Inquiries. Polite concerns about oversight and continuity. The sort that invite scrutiny without demanding it. I'd spent years designing contingencies I hoped to ignore. Backups, triggers, agreements that woke only if I disappeared. Elias used to tease me for planning like an orphan. I never laughed. When they arrived at the office, the silence was wrong. The receptionist's eyes slid away. Keycards opened some doors and stalled at others. Enough access to feel normal, not enough to operate. At 10 sharp, an emergency session convened without them. 5 minutes later, an interim chief was named. Counsel followed, calmly listing exposure. Breaches, conflicts, a shareholder clause Elias had signed long ago when he was tired and trusting, granting me control if internal stability faltered. I watched his face change, as if time were speeding up. Mara leaned toward a microphone that stayed dead. That's when she learned something fundamental. Power doesn't boast. It rearranges furniture. I joined the call late on purpose. I stepped down last night, I said evenly, which activated a provision you seem to have forgotten. Elias stared into the lens as if it could absolve him. Mara searched for a version of me she could bully. He wasn't there. The consultant was released. Accounts paused for review. The vote passed without dissent. When capital is paying attention, steadiness outranks kinship. By noon, Elias was no longer chair. By 1, security escorted Mara out, staff she'd personally greenlit months before. There were no speeches, no pleas, only the clean sound of outcomes aligning. Weeks passed. The business steadied. Clients remained. Revenues rose. I didn't go back. I didn't need to. I sold my stake quietly, above market, to people who invest in builders, not performers. I heard Elias retired sooner than planned. I heard Mara launched a new venture. Everyone deserves a first chapter. I learned something costly and clear. Betrayal doesn't require rage. It requires accuracy.
I didn't shout. I didn't soil my hands.
I did exactly what I was asked, stepped aside, and let the structure fail without the support it depended on. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it simply unlocks a door, lets itself out, and leaves with less weight than it carried in.